Hi, it's Troy Elder with Elder's Best Baking and Beyond. I'm going to start a new series today. This series is going to be devoted to recipes and showing people how to bake bread at home using the sourdough method. And we'll do a variety of different kinds, but we'll start out with the basic. And this is a really old recipe. Who knows how long it's been around. It's rustic white, okay? And I know it's got some wheat flour in it, but trust me, it is a country white bread called Pan Rustico, actually, old recipe. But I thought I would help explain a few things and as I'm going along and show you some of the behind the scenes stuff involved in the bread making process that maybe you didn't pick up during the pandemic when you were all learning how to make sourdough at home. So if you're familiar with a leaven or a starter, that's what's used in sourdough to give bread its lift or its rise instead of yeast. It is a living organism. It's just a mixture of equal parts flour and equal parts water. And then the bacteria and organisms that are good for you, they start fermenting and growing in that mixture, and then it becomes your mother or your starter or leaven. And I've got a mother that's years old that I use from, and once they're alive and you keep them alive, you can use them forever. I mean, there are some out there that are hundreds of years old, and the older they get, the better the bread tastes. So mine's, I think from 2018 maybe. I was into sourdough before the pandemic even hit. Been a baker for a very long time, but anyhow. So this leaven, we're doing an accelerated version of it. I'm in control of my temperature and my environment, and so I'm keeping it warm. I've got a proofing oven. I've got the starter in there because I'm just doing this for a video and education. I'm not really planning on selling it or anything. Well, I'm definitely not planning on selling it. It's just for informational purposes. So in baker's math, real quickly, you just want things to equal out, all right? You're looking for your recipe to come out to be a certain hydration level is what they're looking for. And what that means is what percentage of your recipe is liquid. In my case, I like working with 75 to 80% hydration levels. They're a sticky dough, but they're manageable and you can get a great product out of it. So I decided I'll go for 75% with this classic recipe, and I'm going to do a 1 kilo version. That's 1,000 grams. And I'm going to use metric, sorry, that's just easier. I don't know if anybody or everybody knows this, but the United States is the only country in the world, I think, that still uses the old standard system of ounces and whatnot. Everybody else in the world uses metric. I use metric at work for decades, so it's just easier for me. It's a base 10 system, so much easier. So we've got 1,000 grams of dry ingredients here. Well, technically it's 1,100 grams, and I'll explain that in a second. But we've got 1,000 grams of flours that I'm going to use. I've already pre-measured them out. I've got 600 grams of bread flour, strong bread flour, 300 grams of all-purpose flour because I want a softer texture. I want that really chewy texture. It'll still have some chew, but it'll be a little softer. And then 100 grams of whole wheat flour, okay? And that's just necessary for flavor. You want that in there. It does not make this a whole wheat or a wheat bread, okay? All right, so we've got 1,000 grams total. Now we need to make sure that our liquid ends up giving us a 75% hydration level. So salt aside, that's always 2%. So whatever your recipe flour total is, take 2% of that, and that's your salt. So in this case, I'm using 1,000 grams. I'm using 20 grams of salt for seasoning. Now, back to the water, or the liquids. The leaven itself, I'm using 200 grams of leaven, and so 100 of that is water, 100 of that is flour. That's why I add 100 to my 1,000 of flour. I've got 1,100 grams of dry ingredients. Okay, now I've got 100 grams of wet ingredients in the leaven alone. So now I need to figure out the difference between those two that will give me 75%. Okay, I've got 1,100 grams of dry, and I've got 100 grams of wet already in the leaven. Now, how much water do I need to add to that to bring that percentage up? So it's 75% water compared to 100% flour. And the answer is 730 grams. All right, so 730 grams will give me a 75% hydration rate. And I mean, if you want to stop and zoom in on all that, that's just baker's math. There's all kinds of tutorials out there on how to do this sort of stuff. I don't want to bore you with all the details. So get back, I will have the leaven is proofing. Actually, I have a proofing oven. I told you temperature is important. One of the other reasons that we use weight measurements in bread is that humidity in the air and temperature affect the weight of flour. 1 cup of flour is going to weigh something entirely different in a hot room with high humidity than it's going to in a cool room with low humidity. And that's why we do our measurements by weight and not by volume. 2 cups of flour means nothing to me. All right, 100 grams of flour, that's a different story. I can work with that. So now I've got the proofing oven on to bring the temperature up. I don't want to go too high, so my proofing oven runs a little bit warmer than I like it, so I kind of got to keep an eye on it. I want that leaven to be in the 80-degree range using Fahrenheit, or I'll give you the Celsius measurements for it later. But in that 80-degree range, it'll go rapidly, and I'll be able to start sooner and get through the process quicker. Normally, sourdough is like a 3-day process from beginning to end. I'm gonna have this baby turned out in a day or less. So stick with us. Be back shortly with this first step in the process, which is called autolace, and that's only gonna be where we take our leaven, mix it up in the water, the 730 grams of water we decided on, and then add the 1,000 grams of flour that we're going to use, and no salt. Don't put the salt in yet. We're just going to put the flour and the water together, let that sit for an hour and absorb everything, make sure it's all combined well before we add the salt and before we start working the dough. So see you guys shortly. Hi, it's Troy Elder. We're back here making our Pan Rustico recipe. This is going to be part of the making it home. So you can make your sourdough bread at home, or at least use these recipes to make a version of it if you already know how or whatever. But we're about to start the autolace part of this. When we left off last, I had the daughter, or the mother, basically inoculated her, which is I took some of the, I took 50 grams of the mother, and then I put another 100 grams of water and 100 grams of the flour that I use to feed this. And so what we're gonna do here now is we're going to add the pre-measured water. We have 730 grams of water here. And we're gonna add that to this. And we can zero out the scales there, because we're gonna want 200 grams of this leaven, okay? And we're gonna try to get as close as we can. And you may have heard of, the float test. And as you can see, this stuff is already floating. And some consistency out here. And you don't even need to keep much of this behind you, even if you want to use this up. If I just took some of the mother and made a daughter out of this, so I still got plenty left. But I made just enough for this recipe, maybe plus or minus 5 or so grams, maybe 25 grams. We'll see. And we're getting close there. $200 grams. Okay. All right, so we want to take this now that we're going to measure it out there. Get rid of the scales. We can come here and we're just going to break this up a little bit. Just breaking it up in the water. I already know it floats. That's one of the tests that they do. You do to make sure that your leaven is ripe and ready to go, ready to use. And like I said, I used an accelerated process where I just controlled the environment and increased the temperature, so the starter would go ahead and, or the leaven would go ahead and develop more quickly. The room here, I've got it set up over on the iPad at least. It's 21 degrees Celsius in here, and that's about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But inside my oven, it was closer to 80, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a little bit warmer. but I can tell right now from just feeling this that it could be warmer. I could have preheated that water in the microwave a little bit, and that would have helped things along, but that's okay because I've got this proofing oven that we're going to rely on. All right, well, I've got that mixed up in there nice. Now I've got my pre-measured flours here. I can just add them all in because we're doing the autolace part of this. And that's just basically, letting the flour absorb the water and giving it plenty of time to do so. Okay, so I just try to make this as least messy as possible, but go slowly. You can. Flour will get everywhere, trust me. We're going to mix this together into a rough, shaggy dough here. All right. And this is the part you really want to mix it together good. You don't want to leave any dry patches anywhere that'll cause lumps later. Use your scraper, get down in there, make sure you get everything moist. Any dry bits left behind whatsoever. When you do this at home, of course, you don't have to be so particular. You're making it for yourself, but if you're doing it for a bakery, for example, then weights and everything. But this is scaled down to a home baker's level, and it's just going to make one single kilo loaf or 2 500-gram loaves, whichever I decide to do. We'll see. Just scrape all your dough off your fingers. Back into the bowl here. You can double check, make sure. But I've got everything already going there pretty good. And that's just going to be the start of it. And as you can see, it's just a really rough, shaggy looking dough there. And then all I'll do is cover this up with a towel, and we'll stick it in the proofing oven for about an hour, and then we'll come back and we'll start working the dough, and we'll add our salt then. The reason we don't add salt now is salt actually stops or slows down the growth of any of the bacteria or microorganisms that are growing in here. So we really don't want to do that until we absolutely have to. So we'll be adding salt after the autolace cycle is complete in 1 hour. Okay, see that? It's Troy Elder with Elders Bakery again. We have just got back. Our dough has been autolacing in the proofing oven for an hour now. And now it's time to do its first turn and fold, essentially. People have different ways of doing this, a different amount of time of doing this or whatever, but I'm working on an accelerated schedule. So I'm going to reduce down sometimes, maybe. It just depends on how my dough looks, because I know what I'm doing here and I can adjust that. But in any case, now is the time that, like I said, we're going to add this salt. And it's best to work with these high hydration doughs with wet hands. So I've got a little spray bottle and clean hands, of course, and spray the dough a little bit, spray your hands a little bit, spray the work surface a little bit, and your tool. And you're just going to scrape this out, basically, onto the working surface. And right now I can be a little bit more aggressive with it because it's not really done much bulk fermentation at all, really. It's just done its auto lace. And now this period here is where we're going to start doing the turn and fold. And it's just basically stretching the dough and folding it in on itself, stretching and folding it on itself. And in the beginning here, I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive to make sure, so I make sure everything's mixed together good in here. I'm going to feel around, and I want to get that salt in there too, but really I'm just stretching this out, folding it over. And you can turn this if you want to. You can even pick it up and do it. Just turn it and fold it. Now some people leave it in a bowl to do that. That's fine. However you want to do it, you just want to stretch it and fold it. And I do this the first time, I don't know, 12, 16 times, don't really count it. I'm just looking for the feel, really. I don't want to feel any salt granules or anything like that, any dry patches of dough, nothing like that. I'm being gentle, but at the same time, I'm also feeling around my hands for anything that's strange. Just fold it over. This is already starting to come together pretty good, but I can still feel a little soft in here. So, but the salt, eventually it will dissolve over the next few hours when this thing is fermenting. And this period here is called bulk fermentation. Normally, like the bakery, you do a big batch of this, and it's bulk fermenting in a much larger batch. But this is for home, and so everything's scaled down a little bit. Now I'm just gonna roll, kind of roll it up into a rough ball here, and you can tell, you see that it's not perfect, it's not smooth, it's a little shaggy, and it's going back in the same bowl. It doesn't need to be a clean bowl. It's perfectly fine, just like that. And then I'll just cover this back up. And it goes back in this case, the proofing oven at home. You can leave it out on the counter. Really just depends on the room temperature where you are. If it's warm, then things will go faster. If it's cool, things will go slower. I'm artificially creating the temperature so that I can get things done more quickly. So normally I would put this in under room temperature conditions. I would cover it and let it rest for 2 hours, and then I would do another turn and fold. I do 3 total. I do the first one, then it rests for 2 hours. I do the second one where I only maybe stretch it and fold it 6 times, put it back in, cover it, another 2 hour rest. Same thing, 6 folds, form it, put it back in, and then a 1 hour rest. And then I will do the pre-shape on it. But for right now, I'm gonna cover it, and we're gonna start with a 1 hour timer. And I'll look at it and see if it's doubled in size or increased in volume quite a bit in 1 hour. Then I'll go ahead and start from there. If not, I'll give it the second hour before I do my stretch and fold. So we'll see you guys back here in either an hour or 2. Hi, it's Troy Elliter with Elliter's Best Bakery back here. We've got our dough that's been through its first fold and stretch and fold, and now it's about to go through its second stretch and fold. Now I was looking up earlier on timing, because the timing is always an issue when it comes to baking, and I'm running on an accelerated schedule like I told you. Now I've got a chart that I go by that lets me know based on when the dough is inoculated, or basically when you saw me mix the leaven in with the water and then do the autolays there. That's the beginning of the bulk fermentation process. And I've got a chart that tells me based on the dough's temperature and the percentage of leaven that I used, which is 20%, exactly how long I'm gonna need, or approximately how long I'm gonna need for this to finish. And the temperatures I'm running is gonna be about 4.5 hours. And then I can bake it right then at that point. Or I can put it in the refrigerator for what's called a cold retard. And basically it's just like a bell curve. The dough, it starts growing exponentially up, or exponentially up in your case, from your perspective, and it gets to the top. You want to bake that bread on its way right at the top, or right there at the top. Now, if you put it in the fridge, the top sort of levels out and it becomes an elongated bell curve before it drops off. Now, once it starts to drop off down here, the dough's overproofed, and if you bake it, it's not going to give you the results that you want. So you want to get the dough when it's going up
right at the very top or somewhere in that top, and that's when you want to put it in the oven. If you were to do this process, like I said, at the temperatures I'm using,
Echo, stop.
at 4 hours, 4.5 hours, then I could bake this. Or I can put it in its baton or in this bowl shape and let it form, and put it in the refrigerator and let it rest and buy myself some time. I can leave it in there for maybe another 8 to 12 hours. As long as I keep the temperatures, above freezing or whatever, this is a living organism, it will still continue to rise. Even if it's in the fridge, it's just slower. And that's actually where your flavor development comes from. You get a lot of flavor development from letting it ferment for that long period of time. I'm not concerned about that at the moment. This is not going to any customer or anything. This is strictly a test recipe for my purposes. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go ahead and proceed and do the second turn and fold or stretch and fold and show you how that's done. And then after that, I'm going to let it rest for another hour, and then rise another hour, and then I will take it out one last time for another hour, maybe half hour, and then I will do a pre-shape. And then I'll show you how that's done when we get to the pre-shape part. But essentially it's the same thing, you just want, I'll spray the top with a little bit of water, spray my hands, the work surface. It's just easier to work with wet doughs when your hands are wet. Your clean hands are wet, of course. Now at this point, you want to be more careful taking it out of the bowl. I'm not so super aggressive. And you can be in the beginning. You want to, once the dough starts producing the gases and stuff, you want to keep as much of that in there as possible. But we essentially have the same dough as before, but it's a little bit more pliable now. I'm just going to take it and I'm going to stretch it and fold it. And this time, the first time I did it about 12 or 16 times. This time, I'm only going to do it about 6. So just take it again, stretch it, and fold it over. Like I said, some people do this in the bowl. They just leave it in the bowl and go from there. And you can do that. You can. I just prefer doing it this way. That's just me. All right, that's our third one. And of course, you feel for the dough. This dough is starting to feel nice and soft. There's no areas or clumps in there, dry patches. There's no salt granules or anything I'm feeling anymore. So I've got a really well incorporated dough mixture here to work with. And let's see, that was 4, so I'll mix this 5. Then I'm just going to roll it on over for 6 and start shaping it into a classic, bowl shape or rounded shape. Just sealing the bottom on the end. You want to make a nice little skin here. And there we go. You can see it's already got some bounce and volume to it. And then of course, it's back in the bowl for another hour. Cover it up. I'm going to put it back in my proofing oven, but at home you can leave it out. I'd say if you were doing this at home in like a 70 degree or 21 degree Celsius environment, you would have probably 6 hours. Yes, you'd have about 6 hours to do this stretch and fold process. And then you could bake it immediately or put it in your fridge for overnight and bake it the next day, which is what most people do, because that's where, like I said, that's where you're going to get your flavor development. But for right now, for our purposes, we're just going to do the accelerated version. So we'll be back here in about an hour, and we'll do this one last time and then let it rest, and then we'll get to the pre-shaping portion of this bake. Be right back. Hi, it's Troy Elder again. We're back doing our third stretch and fold. I already done 2 before. Like I told you earlier, I'm on the accelerated schedule with this, and at home, this whole stretch and fold can take place over a 6-hour, maybe even an 8-hour process. It just depends on your temperature. The warmer it is, the faster it goes. The slower it is, the slower it goes. Okay, and the stretching and folding, you can do that
every hour if you wanted to. I wait 2 hours in between mine, and I do 3 sets with just an hour on the last one before I do a pre-shape. But you can do it 6 times. Do it once every hour if you want to. If you've got 6 hours to mess with, that's up to you. The more of the stretching and folding you do, the more development you're going to get. You can get more a better texture probably. Just don't overwork your dough. Okay, so I'm going to start here with this is going to be our final stretch and fold, and then after accelerated schedule, normally I would wait an hour before I did my pre-shaping, but with this accelerated, this depends on how the dough responds. It might be a half hour, but who knows. Anyway, we're just going to, just like before, just gently scrape along the edges of our bowl and turn our dough out onto a wet work surface. Or leave it in the bowl if that makes you feel better. You like that, then do that too. But now the dough's, you can feel it, it's much softer. It's just so nice to work with here at this stage. And like I said, we're just doing like 4, maybe 6 turns. You can see how it's starting to get nice and smooth. It's just, it just feels great to work with this dough at this point. So that was about 4 there. So let's do a 5th one. And then just roll it under there. And now I'm getting that thing I'm looking for. I'm getting air bubbles in here. You can see some air bubbles here and here. You don't want to pop those. Leave them in there. That's great. It gives the bread a really good look, and that means you've got the same air bubbles inside. You're going to have that nice, open air texture that you look for in sourdough. Okay, so this thing basically it's back over here again for its last little hour, and after the hour, I'll come back and we'll switch over from this wet work surface to a floured work surface, and I'll do what's called the pre-shape, where I basically just flour it and put it into its a round shape. In this case, we're ultimately going to end up making a bowl shape, which is round. So a pre-shape and the final shape are going to be the same thing in this case, but if you were making a Retard, for example, an elongated one, you would pre-shape it the same, but then the final shape, you would do a different stitching or method of prepping that one before you put it away for its final proofing. But in our case, and just in case you were curious, I thought of this earlier when I was talking about fermentation and me working with dough temperatures and advanced schedules. And this is how, I've got, it's just a laser thermometer, and it tells me the temperature of my dough, which is 27 degrees Celsius right now. And I can use that and along with an inoculation chart for sourdough to determine my bulk fermentation period and when and how long I need to wait before I start baking. You can probably find those charts online. I don't know, mine's old, it's in French. Sorry, I posted it for you, but it's a paper copy, and unless you speak French, it probably wouldn't be any good anyway. And in any case, we'll be back shortly here, and we will be pre-shaping this thing on a floured surface right before we final shape it, and then let it rest for a little bit and bake it off. Okay, hi, it's Troy Elder with Elder's Best Bakery again. Got the 3rd stretch and fold finished, and it's now risen up again. It's time for me to do the pre-shape. Like I told you before, we're going to end up doing a Retard, not Retard, but we're going to do a boule for our final product. So the pre-shape and the final shape are going to look pretty much exactly the same. But the pre-shape's just the last step in the process, really, before you put it in its vessel for it to proof, whether that be overnight in your refrigerator
or for an hour, or however much time you have left on your inoculation schedule before it needs to go in the oven. So anyway, you can see it's nice and domed up, it's puffy, but I have switched here from a water surface to a floured surface now. And from this point forward, it's going to be all flour. And we're just going to gently scrape this out, turn this out. Okay. Leave that fork roll a second. And then we're going to do a little pre-shaping here. And for a bowl, a round shape, we're just going to pull over and pull it in. And then the same thing over here, like that, and then like this, and like this, and like this. And ultimately, I'm just going to roll the whole thing over and just turn it until I get these ends underneath joined, okay? And you can see how nice and smooth and supple the top of this is, all right? It's just completely transformed from that shaggy mess that we had earlier to what you're looking at now. It's incredible. And there's some air bubbles in here. It's wonderful. This one's going to turn out nice. I'm excited about it. Anyway, now that it's has pre-shape, I'm just going to cover it here with baking cloth. Let's let it sit for another hour here, and then I'll give it its final shape, and I'll put it in this proofing basket, and we will let it rest for a little while and bake it off and see how this baby looks when she's finished. Hopefully it'll look as good as I'm hoping it will. See you soon. Okay, we're back, and before we get to actually baking the bread, I'm just going to do a little setup. Did this in an earlier video, but you know, we can go over it again here. Ovens and oven temperatures. Let's talk about that for a second. I obviously have a gas range. If you have an electric oven, here's where you're in luck. Okay, electric ovens are sealed pretty much, and you can put a water tray on the bottom. And the reason you need this is because this type of bread requires steam during its first 20 minutes of bake time. And you cannot produce steam in a gas oven because, well, fire requires oxygen, and it has input and exhaust outlets to allow oxygen into the oven so that the flame can burn. So there's no way for you to seal that oven and put a tray of water, for example, underneath. But if you do have an electric oven, you can replicate the steam ovens that they have in bakeries and at home using a tray of water, or just put a baking tray in the bottom shelf, boil your kettle of water, and when you get ready to put your bread in, you're gonna pour the water in right behind it and close the door. And then that's it. And the water should be evaporated after about 20 minutes. If not, you can just carefully remove the water pan. But if you have a gas oven, then what do? Well, I have some Dutch ovens, okay? I just have a few here at home. I went here, but I've got two already in the oven preheating. And the Dutch oven, I got one that's the shape of the petard, one the shape of a bowl, or just a round regular, you know, however many quart Dutch oven. And then I've got 2 glasses of ice here, okay? And these, you know, I've already done this before to show you, instead of those fancy lip things, making yourself at home. But back to the ovens with the ice. When I put the bread into the Dutch oven, I just put a little bit of ice between this parchment paper and the wall of the vessel, and that ice melts and generates steam inside the Dutch oven, which, you know, gives it an extra oomph that you probably aren't getting if you're just putting it, say, inside the Dutch oven and counting on the moisture content of the bread to provide enough steam for you. That's not going to be enough steam. So, in any case, that's the secret to getting that look that sourdough has with that nice ear and those raised edges at home is the steam cycle. If you've got an electric oven, like I said, just put a baking tray on the bottom rack, boil your kettle of water, pour that in. After you put your dough in to bake on a baking stone, I would recommend. If not, just a sheet tray will be fine. And then close it 20 minutes. You want that water to be gone, and then finish it off for another 15 to 20 minutes. It's really up to you on that last 15 to 20 minutes. It's all about color and personal preference. I do about 15 minutes at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 230 Celsius for everybody else in the world. And of course you do not want to run a convection cycle if you have one. You're looking for a sealed compartment. So that would be 230 no fan, as they would say in Europe, or 450 degrees and convection off here in the States. And here momentarily, I guess we'll be back and we'll throw the bread in the oven and see what it looks like when it's done. See you shortly. Okay, well, we're back and let's see what we've got here. All right. Yep, the spring's back. You don't want to touch it. So we got the timing right on that. Even though we didn't do the traditional method, we still got the timing right. And hopefully you'll get to see now with that rice flour and how it does its trick on here. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, nothing sticks to it. It's crazy. But now we have 2 pieces ready to go here. Get a brush and get a little bit of this excess off. I don't want crazy amounts of flour there. And this was burned in the oven, so there's no point in doing that. But that flour is going to give it a little bit of extra rustic look there. And there, with the Retards, I don't know if you can see this camera angle the way it is, sorry about that, but with the Retards at least, for me and for us particularly, we just do 1 slash right down the middle. And it's important, you know, you need to go end to end, and you want this at like a 30-degree angle. So you're gonna be, you know, just making a lip here for it to like open up. That's it. You don't want to go straight like this. That's not how you do it. You know, 30-degree angle and tilt, and this one swoop just to go 30 degrees and cut it right down, just like that. Doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be anything. It's rustic. And then for the rounds, I do the same thing, except I just we'll do it in this 4s. And you want to make sure that each one of these overlaps here, so you get the look that you want. Okay, so that's it. And this is the part where we just move a little quickly. Just, as soon as I figure out what I did with my gloves here, we'll be on our way. Voila. Now, at this point you want to kind of work fast because we're going to get these in the oven and going. Like I said, these vessels have been preheating. I'm just going to take them out one at a time and get them in there and get them going. So use this to lift it up. Put it in the vessel. Vessels are quite almost not big enough. But we'll put ice in here. You see the steam already. Get it all covered up. Make sure we got a good seal there. Back in the oven with this one. And out of the oven with this one. And then we're just going to do the same thing. Let's lift this up. Inside our Dutch oven. Pull the ice between between the parchment and the bread. You don't want to put ice cream in contact with the bread. So, fill it up. And put it in here for 20 minutes, and then you're going to take it out of these containers and finish it off for another 15 to 20 minutes outside the containers. And we'll see how it looks. Okay, we're back. It's been 20 minutes, and now we're just going to do a little finagling around the oven. I've got a baking stone on the bottom rack. I'm just going to take these out of their vessels and put them on the baking stone once I move the baking stone to the middle rack. So that should not take long, and don't rush. I mean, you know, people rush around, they end up getting themselves burned, and we don't need to do that. Okay, so let's take these vessels out, 1 and 2, then just move this baking stone up one rack, and I'll close the door while it's here, but there's 1, and there's 2, and we got exactly what we wanted. So now all I have to do is just take these and put them right on the stone. There's 1, and there's number 2, and then we'll set a 15-minute timer and look at them. If I don't like the color, I'll add another 5 minutes. I mean, essentially, you can't overdo these or whatever. They're going to cook to a certain point, and then they're just going to be done. And then it's about color. And if you want to make sure, you can put a instant read thermometer in there. It should be around 200, 210, and it's not going to go above that, unless you burn it. I mean, you leave it in there forever, of course it's going to burn. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. 15 to 20 minutes. Just really look for the color you like and the texture you like. So hopefully we'll have a nice finished product for you here, and I don't know, just 15 minutes, I'm hoping. We'll see you soon. Okay, we are back, and it's been 15 more minutes at 450 degrees Fahrenheit, 230 Celsius. And we're gonna pull them out and see how they look. And they should be pretty good. Now, like I said before, I'm in no big rush because, they're done, okay? And they're just gonna get a little darker in color maybe, but that's about it. Unless you just leave them in there forever and they burn. But, okay, so there you go. Okay, wow. There is loaf number 1. Whether you can hear that or not, but it's nice and crunchy. And here is loaf number 2. And like I said, you can see when I make these cuts, I do it at that 30 or 20 to 30 degree angle, and it gives it that space it needs to open up and make what this is called an ear here. And then you can see inside, you can see all of the fiberglass-like effect from the gluten production and everything. And these are just gorgeous and are actually ours. This is the bread I was making for us for the week, for the next couple of weeks actually. That's the other thing about these breads. They have no artificial preservatives, none. It's 100% organic and all natural. So salt is the only preservative in these. You, first you want to let these cool for at least 1 hour before you cut them, unless you plan on eating the entire loaf right then. Because once you cut them, if they're hot, all that steam will escape and you'll have this stale, dry bread. It'll be horrible. So, that said, let them cool for 1 hour. After they've cooled for 1 hour, then you can cut into them. And I would recommend that you cut whatever you need. If you're just one person, you want to cut off a quarter, a third, whatever, keep that out. It'll last a few days to a week before it starts to get moldy. Now remember, this was a living organism. Bacteria and microorganisms in the air grew the leaven that we needed to give lift to this bread. But when we put it in the oven and baked it at this temperature, we killed all that bacteria. However, bacteria will come back, and that's where the mold will come from. So you want to eat it as soon as you can. Now, if you can't consume that much, you just simply freeze it. A double wrapped bread in the freezer will last 6 months. So And then when you're ready for it, you just pull it out and let it thaw at room temperature, and it'll be just as good as the day you baked it. And I think that's it. Managed to pull off the pretty much impossible. Got two really good looking loaves of sourdough here, and I just started this less than 24 hours ago. So by keeping control of my environment and the dough's environment more specifically, I was able to produce 2 artisan loaves of bread in less than 24 hours, when normally it would take about 3 days to do this kind of thing. Now, did I sacrifice a little bit on flavor? Sure. If the longer it can ferment in the refrigerator, the better the taste is going to be. But this is already a very tasty bread as it is, so these will be just fine for us. Like I said, they're not going to be sold for the bakery or anything. These are going, one of them's going to stay out, the other's going in the freezer. I just don't know which one I want to keep yet, but I don't know. Wow, it smells très magnifique. Anyway, until next time, folks, I think next week I might come back and do another one of these recipe videos with you guys. And probably a wheat one next time, or next week. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like and subscribe, that would help me out, and I certainly would appreciate it. And until then, we will see you maybe sooner, but next week we'll be doing a wheat version of this very same type bread. Have a great one.